Chains and Wings, a novel by VMS. Chapter 1. A Life Half Lived. Zara had always imagined marriage to be a partnership, a union of equals walking hand in hand through the struggles of life. But life had chosen differently for her. From the moment her son was born, Zara had quietly slipped into the role of both mother and father. Her estranged husband, Raghav, once a promising man with vigor, had long surrendered himself to the chains of his own body and mind. The dystrophy, muscular dystrophy that slowly consumed his strength, left him not only dependent but bitter, suspicious of every move Zara made. He doubted her loyalty, he questioned her decisions, and yet he leaned on her for everything, from finances to daily care. It was a prison built not of walls but of unending obligations. Zara was no stranger to sacrifice. She accepted it, wore it like armor. She became the breadwinner, the decision maker, the shield for her son. But beneath her resolute eyes and a commanding presence in business circles, there lived a woman who had been starved of affection, companionship, and tenderness. The world called her strong, neighbors admired her self sufficiency, friends envied her success as an entrepreneur. But when Zara returned home, closed the doors, and let the silence envelop her, she often felt like a spinster trapped in a marriage that had died long ago. Her longings were never loud, they were whispers that rose at night. When she folded her clothes, she looked at the vacant side of her bed. When her body remembered what it meant to be desired, cherished, held, and yet she silenced those whispers. She buried them beneath layers of duty and responsibility for her son. She reminded herself for his future, for his growth, and she would sacrifice her own. To the world, Zara lived a full life, an entrepreneur, a mother, a pillar of resilience, but within she knew her life was less than whole. It was life, yes, but it was also lifeless. Every morning she rose with a determination. Every night she lay down with emptiness, and that was her truth, an existence suspended between strength and longing, between survival and silence. It was only later, when fate began to turn, that Zara would discover the dangerous tension between her buried desires and her righteous resolve. Chapter 2. The Iron Lady of Business. By dawn, Zara's house was alive with routine. She prepared breakfast, packed her son Aurov's bag, and ensured the house ran with clockwork precision. Yet her mind was already elsewhere, on the boardroom, on the numbers waiting to be tallied, on the deals that needed not her clarity and fire. The moment she stepped into her office, Zara transformed. The woman who bore loneliness at home became the iron lady of business. A sari draped perfectly, her hair tied neatly, her sharp eyes behind the rimmed glasses. She carried an aura that commanded respect. Madam Zara is here, whispered her employees as she walked into the building. She was not just a boss, she was a leader, someone who had built her small family business into a growing empire through sheer grit and foresight. In meetings, she was precise, decisive, unflinching. She knew how to read people, how to negotiate, how to silence a room with a single firm sentence. Men twice her age leaned forward to hear her opinion. Investors trusted her instinct more than their spreadsheets. She was strength was personified, a storm contained in a graceful frame. But when the applause entered, when the contracts were signed, when the office lights dimmed and the staff left for the day, Zara remained behind at her desk, staring at the window outside. The city hummed with life, laughter, lovers, families walking together. Inside, Zara's heart echoed with silence. She had everything that many women longed for: success, respect, financial independence, and yet there was a void she could not deny. Success had given her power, but it had not given her companionship. Applause filled her ears, but not her heart. Sometimes she wondered if the two worlds, her iron facade in business and her vulnerable self in private, would ever meet. Could there be a life where she was not only strong but also loud? For now, Zara silenced the question. She gathered her files, locked her office, drove home. There, her estranged husband waited her with his suspicious glances and his endless dependency. There, she would never once again fold away her desires like unspoken letters and let the world believe she had it all. But fate, she did not yet know, was already weaving a path where her two selves would collide. Chapter 3, The Anchor of Her World. If Zara's life was a storm of sacrifice and silence, then Arav was a single calm shore she clung to. From the day he was born, she had made a silent promise to herself that no matter what she lacked, no matter what life withheld from her, her son would never feel the absence of love, dignity, or opportunity. Every choice she made circled back to him when she stepped into business. It wasn't for ambition, it was to build a future strong enough to carry Aurov's dreams. When she swallowed her own longings, it wasn't not for honor, it was to protect his innocence, to shield him from the ugliness of a fractured marriage. Her estranged husband Raghav often muttered his suspicions, sometimes even in front of the boy, but Zara always diverted the conversation, wrapping Aurav in warmth before the poison of doubt could touch him. She raised him not only with affection but with a discipline. Aurav was taught to respect women, to value truth, to live clean. And while other boys in the neighborhood fell into distractions, Zara kept him grounded, encouraging books over vices, hard work over shortcuts, confidence over arrogance. Her evenings, after long hours at work, were devoted to him. They studied together at the dining table. They walked side by side to the temple on weekends. Sometimes they sat on the terrace watching the stars, and Aura would listen wide eyed as Zara told him stories, not fairy tales, but lessons but lessons about resilience, morality, and courage. Ma, he once asked her, his young eyes searching, why do you work so hard when everyone else mothers stay home? Zara smiled, brushing his hair from his forehead. Because, Arav, I don't want you to just live. I want you to fly. And for that, I must build your wings. Arav believed her, observed her values like breath. Slowly, people began to notice the boy was different. While his father sulked in his shadows, Arav shone in his mother's light. For Zara, he was more than a son. He was her redemption, her reason, her anchor in a world that often felt like quicksand. Every time her own loneliness clawed at her, she looked at him and reminded herself, this is why I endure, this is why I survive. But deep inside, even as she smiled at him, another whisper lingered, and what would become to her when Ara grew into a man and built a life of his own? For now, though she pushed and thought away, for now, Ara was a world and she his. Chapter 4, The Glances She Could Not Ignore. Zara never dressed to impress. Her saris were elegant but simple, her jewelry minimal, her demeanor dignified. Yet, wherever she went, whether it was a temple, the market, or the society gatherings, eyes followed her. She carried herself with the quiet strength of a woman who had seen life's storms and still stood tall. Her success as a businesswoman only sharpened her presence. Her beauty, softened by maturity, glowed not from vanity but from confidence. Men noticed middle aged neighbors. Some stuck in dull marriages, some lonely themselves, found themselves drawn to her. Whispers grew. Some admired her resilience, others romanticized her independence. A few crossed into obsession, making her silence for invitation. Many wished to possess the mystery that was Zara, the woman who seemed complete and yet unattached. But among them, one man stood out. Kiran. Unlike the rest, he did not simply admire from a distance. He sought her out, offering help with errands, making excuses to converse with her, trying to slip into her trust. He was charming, attentive, and persistent, qualities that slowly wore down the iron walls Zara had built around her emotions. For the first time in years, she found herself smiling at someone's words, listening, wondering, feeling, and it was frightening. A time when she lay awake from a long day, her mind betrayed her. She questioned herself, was it wrong to want companionship, to crave laughter that wasn't forced, a shoulder that wasn't weighed down by suspicion? Yet each morning, as she watched Aro prepare for school, her resolve returned. She reminded herself her son was her own and only priority, and she could not let weakness could his and she could not let weakness could cloud his upbringing. But Zara was human, not stone, and Kiran knew it. He did not give up slowly, subtly. He made her see what she had long buried, that beneath the successful entrepreneur and righteous mother was a woman still capable of longing, capable of love. And so Zara found herself torn between the dignity of her responsibilities and the whispers of her middle aged heart. She was no stranger to sacrifice, but this battle was different, for it was not against society or survival, it was against herself. Chapter 5, the slip of the heart. Zara had always believed she was immune to temptation. For years, she had kept her emotions locked away like old letters, never to be read, never to be spoken. But Kiran's persistence, his warmth, and his words chipped away at her defenses in ways she had not expected. He told her things no one else did. You have lived too long for others, Zara. When was the last time you lived for yourself? The question lingered in her mind like a forbidden tune. One evening, after an exhausting day at work, she found herself walking home with Kiran. The street was quiet and lamps flickering. His voice was gentle, his gaze steady. For a moment, the loneliness she had carried for decades surged forward, raw and uncontainable. She allowed herself a slip, a smile too warm, a silence too long, an acceptance of the comfort he offered. It was brief, almost innocent, but to Zara it felt like betrayal. That night, as she sat alone in a room, guilt consumed her. She stared at the mirror and saw not a strong woman, not a mother, not an entrepreneur, but a fragile heart that had almost betrayed the very vow she had lived by. Tears she had buried for years spilled freely. How could I, she whispered to herself, how could I think of my own desires when my son depends on me, when his future rests in my hands? Her estranged husband, though distant and suspicious, was still alive, though of a shadow and hour of her light, was still young, still learning. Zara realized that to indulge in her emotions now would mean shaking the very foundation she had built for him. By dawn, her regret had hardened into resolve. She stood before her puja altar, folded her hands, and took a vow silently. From this day, I will not falter. My life, my breath, my purpose, everything is for Aro. My happiness will come through His. My strength will be His wings. I will live not for myself but for Him. When she walked out of her room, her eyes were swollen and but her face was calm. She had slipped, but she would not fall again. Zara had chosen a path, even if it meant walking it alone, and yet fate was not finished with her. Chapter 6, Chains and Wings. Kiran was not a man who gave up easily. Zara's silence, her careful distance, her formal tone, all of it only deepened his resolve. He had seen the flicker in her eyes, the brief crack in her armor that night, and he was convinced if he could break those chains, she could be his. Zara, he said one evening, walking alongside her after a community meeting, you are not made to live alone. You have punished yourself long enough, don't you see? You deserve more. Zara's steps faltered. His words were sharp arrows piercing wounds she thought she had sealed. She turned to him with firm eyes. My life is not my own anymore, Kiran. I chose my son over myself. I cannot turn back now. But he only smiled undeterred. Your son will grow, he will fly away, he will have his own world, his own family, and what then? Will you spend your night staring at walls, clutching your loneliness like a shred? Zara looked away, but inside his words echoed dangerously close to her deepest fears. She had always known this truth. Ara would one day build his own destiny, and she would be left alone. She had simply chosen not to face it. Kiran, sensing her silence, pressed harder. You have carried chains all your life, chains of a loveless marriage, a duty of sacrifice. I want to give you wings, a second chance, not for pity, Zara, but because you deserve it. Her heart trembled. She could feel her walls shaking, but then, as if to save herself, she drew strength from the very image that kept her alive. Aura's face, his innocent faith, his in her, his trust, and she would never falter. Kiran whispered, her voice breaking, don't make me fight myself. I am not a free woman. My virtue is not negotiable. My life is my son's. But Kiran stepped closer, his eyes burning with conviction. One day, Zara, you will understand. You need a companion, not a shadow of a husband who suspects you, not the applause of a business world that forgets you by evening, a real partner. And when you do, I will be here. Zara walked away that night, her heart torn between two worlds, her virtue and her buried desires, her chains and the possibility of wings. For the first time, she was forced to confront a truth she had long denied. Her greatest enemy was not Kiran, not her husband, not society. It was the storm within her. Chapter 7, The Shadow Fades. Raghav had been a presence in Zara's life for decades, though never truly a partner, suspicious, bitter, and weakened by his illness. He lived like a man consumed by his own darkness. Zara had long since accepted his existence as a burden she carried, not out of love but out of duty. But the illness that had slowly crippled him was now speeding its course. His limbs failed him, his breathing grew shallow, his temper sharper, yet tinged with helplessness. The house that once echoed with his accusations now rang with the sounds of medicines being measured, of caretakers moving quietly, of time running out. Zara, though estranged from him in every sense of love, did not abandon her role. She ensured he was cared for, fed, treated, and comforted, if only for the sake of humanity, and because Aurav still looked at his father with the innocence of a son. One evening, as the rain slashed against the windows, Raghav called for Zara. His voice was frail, his eyes no longer filled with suspicion but with a hollow resignation. You were always stronger than me, he admitted, his words breaking like a brittle glass. I wasted years doubting you, chaining you. Maybe I was afraid you would see what I wasn't. Zara stood silent, her heart a strange mixture of pity and exhaustion, and she had long ago buried the hope of hearing such words. Now they came too late. Within days, Raghav's decline ended in silence. His last breath left not just a man behind, but the heavy weight of years of suspicion and bitterness. The house felt different after his passing, quieter, lighter, but also emptier. For Zara, widowhood was not grief for lost love, it was an odd freedom mixed with loneliness. She was unshackled, but at an age where starting over felt both possible and impossible. Arav, now grown up into a young man with Zara's strength in his veins, held her hand at the funeral. He looked at her, eyes clear, voice steady. Ma, you have lived for everyone but yourself. You taught me to fly, but what about you? you? Don't you deserve to live too? Zara's lips trembled. She had no answer. The vow she had once taken to live only for him now stood at crossroads. Her son was no longer a boy. He was preparing to step into his own world, his own future, and standing quietly at a distance, watching with patience, was Kiran. The shadow of her past had finally faded. The question now was, would Zara allow herself to walk into the light? Chapter 8, The Choice She Never dreamed of. Dreamed of. The days after Raghav's death were strange for Zara. For the first time in decades, she was not weighed down by suspicion nor by the bitter words of a man who had long since stopped being her partner. She should have felt free, but freedom came with a hollow silence. Her house was quieter than ever. Arav was busy, often buried in his studies and preparation for the career he dreamed of. In the evenings, when he retreated to his room, Zara found herself sitting alone in the living room, staring at the emptiness. The clock ticked louder, the walls felt closer, and her heart asked questions she had no courage to answer. It was Arav who broke the silence one night as they shared dinner. He put down his spoon and looked at her with unusual seriousness. Ma, he said softly, all my life I have watched you sacrifice for me, for this family. You have given me everything. But what about you? Have you ever asked what you want? Zara froze. She had never spoken about her longings to her son. Her instinct was to dismiss it, but Arav's gaze held her steady. You always thought me to be fearless, he continued, but you are afraid to live for yourself. Her throat tightened. Arav, I am a mother. My life is you. He smiled, but it was tinged with maturity. And I will always be your son, but soon I have my own path to walk. You gave me wings, Ma. Now I want to see you use yours. Those words haunted her long after the conversation ended. It was in this fragile space that Kiran reappeared, not with charm this time, but with quiet determination. He found her at this society garden one morning, sitting alone on a bench. You have built empires, Zara, he said, taking a seat beside her. You have raised a son who will make the world proud. But tell me, when was the last time you thought of Zara? The woman, not Zara, the mother or business leader. She turned to him, tried, almost defensive. I've chosen my life, Kiran. My responsibilities define me. But he shook his head. No, Zara, they confined you. You have been chained too long. Let me give you wings. Not to take away your son, not to erase your past, but to walk beside you in the second half of life. Don't you see? You don't need to live alone anymore. Zara's heart pounded. His words were dangerous yet undeniable. For the first time, she saw no temptation in his eyes but companionship, a promise of shared burdens, a shared silence, and perhaps even shared joy. That night, as she sat by a puja lamp, Arab's voice echoed in her mind. You gave me wings. Now I want to see you use yours. For the first time in years, Zara allowed herself to wonder, was it possible to live again, not as a sacrifice, but as a woman reborn? The choice she had never dreamed she would face was now staring at her, and this time she wasn't sure if saying no was strength or cowardice. Chapter 9, Wings of Her Own. The weeks that followed were a quiet storm inside Zara. Each day she moved through her routine with grace, managing her business, guiding Arav, attending social gatherings, but inside the battle raged. One part of her clung to the vow she had lived by for so long, to give her entire self to her son, to deny herself companionship, to endure alone, to remain untouched by the world's temptations. The other part, awakened by Kiran's persistence and Arav's gentle push, whispered of freedom, of a second life where she could be more than just a mother or a businesswoman. A life where her laughter did not echo alone, where her evenings were filled with warmth, not silence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Zara sat on the terrace with Arav. The young man had grown into someone she could lean on, strong, thoughtful, wise beyond his years. He broke the silence first. Ma, he said softly, I know you are fighting yourself, but you don't need to. Papa is gone. I'm grown. You have done more than anyone could ever ask. Now it's time you choose for yourself. Zara looked at him, her heart swelling with pride and ache. You think I should? I think you should. You should live. Arav said firmly. Truly live. You are not just my mother. You are Zara, and you deserve happiness. Her eyes glistened. For years she had silenced the woman within her. Tonight, her son gave her permission to let the woman breathe. The very next day, Kiran came to see her. He stood at her door, not with demands, but with patience in his eyes. I won't force you, Zara, he said quietly, but I will walk beside you if you let me. This is not about possession, it is about companionship, about giving you the life you denied yourself for too long. For a long moment, Zara said nothing, then slowly she extended her hand, not trembling, not hesitant, but steady. Yes, Kiran, she whispered, her voice carrying both relief and resolve. I'm ready, not because I need someone, but because I want to live again, and this time it will be my choice. Kiran's eyes softened, and for the first time in years, Zara felt a weight lift off her chest. The chains that had bound her were gone, replaced by wings she had given herself. That night, she prayed beyond her altar. Zara smiled through her tears. She had been a daughter, a wife, a mother, a leader. Now, at last, she was simply herself. And in that moment, she knew this was not the end of a story, but the beginning of a second life. Epilogue. The bloom after winter. Years passed like turning pages in a well loved book. Arav, the boy Zara had raised with so much devotion, grown into a fine man, an entrepreneur, a teetotaler whose name began to echo in the same circles that once celebrated his mother. He had become everything she had dreamed for him, and upright, ambitious, grounded, unshaken by the visors that swallowed so many of his peers. At his wedding, Zara stood tall, radiant in a silk sari, his eyes moist with pride, and she watched her son step into a life of his own. She felt no emptiness, no ache of being left behind. Instead, she felt the quiet joy of a gardener who had seen her sapling grown into a tree strong enough to stand on its own. And beside her, through every ritual and every silent glance, stood Kiran, not as an outsider, not as a shadow, but her chosen companion. Their life together was not filled with youthful passion or dramatic gestures. It was gentler, steadier, the kind of love that came from mutual respect and shared silences. Kiran never tried to erase Zara's past. Instead, he became part of her present, filling her evenings with conversation, her mornings with laughter, and her home with a warmth she had once believed was beyond her reach. Sometimes, one quiet night, Zara would sit by the window looking out at the stars. She thought of the years she had lived in chains, bound to suspicion, duty, and silence, and then she would glance at Kiran, reading nearby or sipping his tea, and smile. The chains were gone, and she had her wings now. Her second life wasn't about escaping the first, it was about honoring her sacrifices while finally allowing herself the freedom to be happy. For Zara, who had given so much of herself to the world, to the family, the greatest gift had come late, but not too late. A chance to live as a woman, not just as a mother, not just as a survivor, but as Zara. And this time she lived fully.